Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, one of the fastest growing real estate investing podcasts in the world. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors? Find out what got them to where they are now. Get insight into their daily habits and take these insights to inspire your own growth. Each episode, Jonathan Greene shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor and the founder of Streamline, a data-driven, investor-friendly, independent real estate brokerage located in Madison, New Jersey. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, this is the free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. My guest today is Julie Thomas. She's the founder of STR Edit and the STR Visionary, but she's really focused on the edit now. She loves design and she loves helping other people with their design of short-term rentals. But we're talking about a lot of cost-conscious items on this and how you can do short-term rentals for not as much as you think. This is a great show and very accessible if you think that short-term rentals are unaffordable to you as an investor. Let's go. This is episode 342 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Julie Thomas. Julie is the founder of STR Edit and the STR Visionary. With 10 plus years of experience flipping and staging rental properties, she blends cost-conscious design with functional setup to create spaces that photograph beautifully, function seamlessly, and drive repeat bookings. And much more stuff as well. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you and glad we connected on LinkedIn, which is my preferred method for finding guests on my own now to avoid all the podcast bookers.
Yes.
But yeah, I like your background and I know you had experience. So how did you first get into real estate? Because I know you didn't just all of a sudden one day wake up and say, hey, I'm going to just become like an STR coach.
Yeah, absolutely did not. Wasn't saying that when I was in fifth grade.
Right.
So my husband and I actually first invested back in 2015. And it sort of happened by accident, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
I was teaching full-time middle school English language arts, and my husband was in IT audit. But we traveled out to West Yellowstone, Montana a lot. I don't know if you've ever been out there.
No, I want to. It's Montana itself is just on a bucket list of go.
Yes.
Yeah.
It needs to be on everybody's bucket list. It's pretty special for us too. But we had snowmobiled out there for years and we would rent cabins with friends, and we were really, really disappointed by our experiences with these cabins. And at one point we kind of said, well, what if we were to do this?
Yeah.
Like what's stopping us? At the time we lived in Minnesota. And so obviously there is a distance barrier there, but we thought, okay, if we hired
you're good
a
with
cleaner,
snow.
Yes, we're very good with snow. Exactly. We understand cold temperatures.
Yeah.
And Montana is a place where a lot of Minnesotans go, I think, because the climate is very similar. But they just get more consistent snow out there. The trails are calmer. And so we really understood the area. And with our experiences just carrying a lot of disappointment for us, we just thought, well, what would we want to be different if we were to run our own cabin? And a cabin came up for sale. It was currently being used as a short-term rental, but it wasn't performing well. And the older gentleman wanted out of it. And so we scraped together every extra dime we could. We applied for a non-interest credit card and
Oh, you really went for it. Yeah.
Yes, we went for it. We were definitely not prepared, I think, for what we were stepping into. But we said we're committed. We believe in the vision of this. We do believe that we'll get ourselves paid back.
Yeah.
We ran some numbers and we jumped in. We found a cleaner and we found someone to manage the hot tubs for us. And we went for it. That's how we got
awesome.
into it.
I think that's encouraging for people. I mean, you had a plan based on your own personal experiences and my history. And I think so many of people who've eventually gotten into bigger parts of STR, their original avatar is always themselves. It's either personal use or what they want. What were your disappointments early? Because I think it's a good way to gauge what other people think of their short-term rental stays and what they're disappointed with. And maybe they can have an idea from this and say, hey, well, actually, Julie has a great idea. Maybe I can do better than what's out there, especially because those of us in the business, we can look at AirDNA. I mean, you can go on Airbnb and see what the competition is in the area in terms of like what it looks like and see if you can design-wise beat it. But operationally is really important as well.
Right, right. And the fortunate part for people who are getting into it now is that they have all this technology that we didn't have access to
I was
that
doing
back
it
in
20 years
2015.
ago. There was like, 3 short-term rentals in the area, which again is
Right.
great for booking, but you really have no basis to know what you're
No.
even supposed to charge.
Exactly, exactly. We purely had to go on our own experience and what it was that people were
Right.
charging on the handful of cabins that were being rented. So, like, one distinctly disappointing experience was this cabin looked really awesome. We rented it for our families for Christmas. And when we showed up, there was a hole in the ceiling above the
Ooh,
dining room table.
yeah.
They hadn't cleaned up from whatever it was that had happened there. We were assuming water damage. When we went into the kitchen, there were mouse droppings on the
It's like
countertops.
all my worst nightmares
Uh-huh.
occurring all at
Yeah,
once.
it was real rough. And of course, you didn't see any of this at the time, the 5 to 10 pictures that they had
Yeah,
listed out on
yeah.
VRBO. And then to top it all off, the bedroom that my husband and I were staying in had a bathroom attached to it, but the pipes froze because there was a hole in the wall behind the
Huh.
toilet that
Yeah.
led to the outdoors. So it just was a hot mess, the whole thing. And we just felt really let down that at the time, our families are pulling together money. We're
Yeah.
spending money on this
Yeah.
vacation. And you show up expecting this really cool cabin Montana experience. And that's what you're dealing with on your vacation.
Yeah.
And it really lit a fire in us of like, this just isn't right to take people's money and get away with this. And people deserve better. And so if they're going to spend this money to come out on these family vacations, they deserve to enjoy it and have a stress-free experience. And that was our biggest takeaway, is that what it is that we put out there online needs to match our
Yeah.
guests' expectations so that there isn't disappointment, because that's what leads to the bad reviews, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
I
when the
completely
reality doesn't
agree.
align.
I think
Yeah.
it's so important because you can't be everything to everyone. So to be very clear about your property is what helps people not make a mistake. Like if somebody is not as like needs something that's a little bit more accessible, maybe they have movement or mobility issues, you want to know that they have to walk up a hill to get there. You don't want people to have that disappointment. I think all of us, I've been staying in short-term rentals my whole life. So I've had very few disappointments percentage wise, which is great. But yeah, I think that people forget that a lot of people are putting together holiday funds, family gatherings, and then you get there and it's not like there's another cabin available. You
Correct.
can't just go to a hotel if you're remote. So it can really ruin something that people are looking forward to for a whole year. And that's why I do think, even though short-term rentals, of course, across the board now are really widespread, there's a lot of bad advice, but I think that the push that it's a hospitality industry is really helpful because the best operators are doing, as you say, we're trying to provide the best experience for people so they can say, that is the best money I've spent and we had a great time.
Yes. Yes. And they genuinely feel like you have their best interests at heart. And I,
Yeah,
I totally agree with you that I think one of the mistakes that people make is they think we can just take this house and put it out there. And
yeah.
these are people who don't want to stay at hotels, so they'll be fine with whatever they're staying in, but you're still competing with the hotels.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why hotels are successful is because they're consistent and people know what to expect when they show up. So if
And
you
there's
have in
always
your
somebody to
mind,
call. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
exactly. And there's always someone to call that can fix things. And if you don't operate your home in the same manner, they're going to choose somebody else or a hotel every single time because they can't trust that experience. There are people that go away from Airbnb and VRBO and all these rental sites for a while if they have
Yeah.
a bad experience, because they just say, well, I can't trust it.
I think it's fair. I mean, I recently had on Justin Ford, who's like the STR safety expert, and he said that
Mhm.
there's a growing trend that the biggest percentage of why people go to hotels over Airbnb, even though they'd rather have, a kitchen and a laundry, is because of safety. And
Yeah.
safety plays into what you're saying. You certainly didn't, of course, they're not going to have a picture with a hole in the ceiling, but like, how does somebody not know that's what they're presenting? You know,
Yes.
when somebody's coming for a week, it's crazy. It's really crazy that happens. Did you eventually, we'll get through all of the years that you went through until you got to your companies, but it's interesting because your original experience now plays into what you do now, because it seems like what you want to do is help people avoid that. And for people who, don't have the time to focus as much, you're there to give them a cost conscious option. And also, the one question I was going to start with that I want to hit you with right now is,
Yeah.
like, do you have to spend $50,000 to, you look at all of these like designs on these 8 bedrooms in Scottsdale, and I think people are scared of doing short-term rentals because they think they need to spend 50 or 100K on design, when it's not the truth. I mean,
No.
in the right property, sure, but no, you don't have to. Am I right?
I am really glad that you brought this up. So one of my biggest pet peeves right now is everything we're seeing on social media about these super fancy properties that all have 100,000 plus budgets.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
it is scaring the average person away from being able to have an investment that can really be life-changing for their families. Like,
Yeah,
for us, investing in short-term rentals has completely changed the access to money, that we're able to go now do things that we never would have dreamed of prior to investing. And it's so
yeah,
disappointing to me that that's the idea that's out there right now. Is it means that it has to be the sport courts and the
right.
pickleball courts and the in-ground pool and all of these things. And I have some really specific examples, if you want me to cover them, of
Yeah,
properties that we've invested in with very small budgets and the returns that you can have on those. So I'm
yeah.
happy to go into that if you want me to. But
Yeah, I'd love to, because again, I have lots of friends who do the large scale. And I think for big groups, like, yeah, that's what you need to do. You can do that in Orlando,
yeah,
Scottsdale, in these places where you have that. But, then people try to apply that philosophy. Like, one of my markets that I do a lot of business in is upstate New York. And that's not the same vibe. It's a very nature vibe. You're looking for more wellness retreats. And me personally, I don't want a lot of the loud stuff. I would never stay at one of those places. So
yeah,
that's not everybody's vibe. A lot of people are going on weekend getaways. The parents take the kids, and you're like, this is the only time we're going to just be able to relax. So
yes,
there's a lot of different versions of what's out there, but it's kind of like squeaky wheel gets the grease. What gets more of
yeah,
the publicity is, like you said,
yes.
a swimming pool and a pickleball court and a pool, and, a giant Connect Four. But I don't think you need that. Let's hear about why you don't.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll start with our properties in Montana, for example. And I think you bring up a really good point, is that you have to know the market that you're
Yeah.
investing in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Doing pools and pickleball courts may make a lot of sense in Sedona or in Phoenix.
Yeah.
Where my husband and I own properties, we're in a really small town at the west entrance of Yellowstone National Park. People are not going out there to play pickleball. People
Exactly.
are not going out there to swim in
Also,
the
your
pool.
neighbors will probably come with a shotgun for you. Really, like that. Like you have to
Literally.
know what you're dealing with community wise.
Yes.
It's a great point. Yeah, keep going.
Yes. And so the amenities out there are a hot tub, but they're wanting to go into the park with their families. They're
Right.
wanting their kids to be disconnected from devices and technology, right? Like, it's not a bit about the big fancy movie rooms. And so I'll give you an example. So like
Yeah.
our very first cabin that we invested in, our budget was 20,000. That was it. Like, we literally could not go a dollar over. And that was
For
including
renovations and furniture, pretty much anything, including like dishes, all of it.
all of it,
Okay.
including
Awesome.
even like
Yeah.
the hot tub,
Yeah.
right?
All right. Yeah.
So we had $20,000 to work with because I'm on a teacher income and my husband was in IT, and we were earlier on in our careers at this time. And so we scraped together 20,000 and we said, we have to make this work.
Oh,
And
before
so,
you get into it though,
yeah,
I think that's a great point, because I think that it would help people to set a very firm budget and stick to
yeah,
it, because I think it will help you be more cost conscious along the way. Do you agree with that? Because I like where you're going with this, to say like, we only have 20K. So like, we need to know how many dishes we need and start
yeah.
backing up into what amenities we can still afford and make it worth it.
Yes, exactly. And you have to prioritize every dollar,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
if you know that to be competitive in a neighborhood in Montana, you need a hot tub,
Right.
that has to be like priority number one. Okay, so what's it going to take for you to get a hot tub? Now take that off of your
Yep.
20,000. What are you left with? Now we have to then figure out how we're going to do furniture and linens and kitchen appliances and different things. And so that's exactly what you do because it can get away from you
Yeah.
very,
Real
very
quick.
quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, especially when you're looking at, the eye candy properties on social media and you convince yourself that that's what you need to do. And now you're spending on unnecessary things that you're not going to see the return for. And so, yes, we always recommend setting a very, very specific budget and working in that. It makes you more creative in terms of what you have to go find. So
Yeah.
we knew that we were going to be doing a lot on Facebook Marketplace at the time. And so we ended up renting a trailer in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we stored all this Facebook stuff that we collected in our garage. We loaded it up in a trailer and we drove it to Montana. And
That's awesome.
that's how we saved money. And you
People
get
can still
creative.
do that. Again, I
Yes.
mean, they can. I think you had the time to be able to collect the opportunity
Yeah.
and take it out. So everybody doesn't. Maybe that's why somebody hires you or somebody else. But I think
Correct.
for those people looking to get in can connect to your story because it's like you didn't have this giant, budget to spend everything. You're really
No.
making sure that you're going to spend it the right way. And I think the way that you described it is right. What are the must-haves to compete in the market? And then
Yep.
how do we make sure that we have all of the like common necessities and don't forget everything? Because that's like always I always tell people to
Yeah.
send 3 of their friends first before you send anyone else because they'll tell you what's missing. Because it's
Yes.
always that first review where like, oh, I just want to let you know you didn't have any pots and pans. And you're like, oh, like the kind of obvious things that you just forget.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. You do. And it is so much to keep track of, and you're not going to remember everything. And we have the same advice for our clients too. You need to live in it for at least a week
Yeah.
after you
Gotta
set
go
enough.
yourself, send
Yes.
friends off without getting a review. Just tell them be really hard on the property.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like avoid those pitfalls for those first few guests because you've already trialed it. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's worse as a short-term rental to try hard and start with a 1-star review because
Yeah.
you forgot to put dishes in there?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it ruins your entire investment from the start.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And you can probably eventually crawl your way out of it, but
Yeah.
it'll take a long time.
Yeah,
It'll
if
take
it
a
was a
long
real
time.
mistake, you can, and you
Yeah.
can probably get them to take that down. But
Yeah.
it's tough. You don't want to start like that. Okay, so
Yeah.
you guys pack up the truck and you go out there.
Mhm.
Did you already have the full kind of 20 spent, and you're just bringing it all with you?
Mhm. Yeah. And we had
Nice.
maybe a little bit left over to like go through the cabin and do those double checks of, oh, we
Right.
forgot a
What
blender
we
or we
miss.
forgot
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, we hauled it out. We had 2 weeks over my Christmas break from teaching to get it set up. And to put it in perspective, so the prior owner was earning around $42,000
How big
annually.
Is the cabin, by the way?
5-bedroom.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow, it's
Yeah.
big.
Yeah. They're big it's a big cabin. So 5-bedroom, 4-bath,
Wow.
and like 2 living spaces, the kitchen, and then it has like an upper deck and then this lower deck. And so the upper deck, my husband worked with my brother who's an engineer to reinforce it to put the hot tub in. And we picked up the hot tub ourselves on like an open trailer and
Yeah.
hauled that out there. So we saved some money on delivery and installing and that kind of thing. And so we got really creative, really, really gritty, but we had 2 weeks to set it up. And we got out there. And so the previous owner had been earning 42,000. We invested the 20,000. And the following year, we grossed 82,000.
Yeah.
So,
That's great. Yeah.
And that's on a $20,000 budget. But again, it was because we prioritized the things that we knew were going to matter. And we also said, so for example, like there was a couch that I would have said was okay-ish. Like ideally we would have replaced it at the onset, but we were out of money. And so what we said is, okay, after this first year, if we do as well as we think we're going to do, then when we come back to do our maintenance trip, we're going to then reinvest that money, right? And so we're going to then take some dollars and say, okay, now we're going to replace that couch because it's not a must do right now.
Yeah.
And so that was really how we prioritized the 20,000 was what do we absolutely need to do right now to give guests the best experience possible? And the cabin went from like 3.5-ish stars to straight 5-star reviews and booked out solid.
Yeah.
And so again, it doesn't take a lot. And honestly, most of the clients that we work with, our budgets are sitting somewhere in the like $15,000 to $25,000, $30,000 price
Very
range.
accessible. Yeah.
It's very accessible.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting, I want to get your take on this because I know we'll get into the operational part of it as well. But I think that reviews are really 50-50. It's 50 design that doesn't match up and then 50 operational. Probably actually reviews are even more operational inefficiencies or stuff missing. Do you agree with that? And how well did you guys then begin to do your operations compared to how the previous owner was probably doing operations, which a lot of people, they get an Airbnb that's just going to do it work itself, and then stuff breaks and they don't know how to respond. So how well did you guys do operationally to get adjusted to that and get ready as owner operators? Because I think that's hard for some people.
Mm-hmm. So interestingly, he had been using a property management company. And you probably would have thought he was managing it himself with how poorly run it was, because people will be like, oh, if he had hired an expert, it probably would have gone a lot better. But no, he had handed it over to a property management company that was just very disconnected. You could tell they weren't really in tune with what they needed. They weren't investing in the cabin. They weren't telling him to invest in the cabin. And so it was just tired. It felt like a garage sale in there. And so a lot of the reviews were about the furniture, very little about the actual property management itself. They seemed to be pretty responsive to guest concerns and complaints.
Right. But that's all they were doing. They weren't giving him advice on how to turn it into a business. They were just managing, which again, maybe they really were doing their job as property managers, but that's where the disconnect is. What do you want to be? Do you want to run an okay business, or do you want to run a business that can scale? And you guys obviously decided immediately on the other.
Exactly. And that was sort of what the cabin needed was both of those pieces. It not only needed good property management, but it really needed somebody to come in and like update it and invest in it. And what we saw the reviews go from was no complaints about the things that were actually now in the cabin. The beds were now comfortable, right? The furniture was comfortable and conducive to larger groups because it had been really underfurnished. But then we started getting all these compliments about the management, like how much we were in contact with people, how much we cared, how much information we sent them ahead of time. Now, we made the personal choice to not give up. At the time, it would have been probably 10-ish% to a property management company.
That's not bad, by the way. I mean, some are up to like 25% now.
Yes, it's a lot more expensive. But even at the time, we were kind of crunching the numbers and we're like, and after watching his experience with a property management company, it soured us on the available options in the area. So what we did is when we were there, we started asking around in town at like hardware stores, like, do you know any cleaners? Do you know anybody who does hot tub maintenance? And we just decided we can hop on a really quick flight if we need to get out there to deal with issues, which we have certainly had happen. And we're going to try to manage it ourselves. And so on top of a full-time teaching job and my husband doing IT, it's not like we quit our jobs. We were responding to emails and doing bookings. And then we just had a really good a really good system with people who were on the ground for us, that we were following up on and making sure that went well. So I would have said like the reviews were very much based on what was in the cabin, but they also improved from a property management perspective because they saw that somebody actually cared. And to this day, my husband and I still manage our own properties. Because we just like the personal connection with our guests. And I think our guests feel that. There are a lot of really good property management companies out there now. It's nothing against that, but it was just our personal decision to just be more personally invested and connected to our investments.
Yeah, and I think operationally is what operations saves
the reviews. Like if something breaks in the house and you're immediately responsive and you ship something on Amazon and it's fixed, or you get someone there to fix the air, you're not getting a 4-star review. You're getting a 5, like, hey, you're going to get, hey, something went wrong and they fixed it right away. That's going to actually build trust in other people to know that it's not perfect every time. That's why the kind of responsiveness, I think, is the thing that really buries the owners who thought it was going to be, passive to own a short-term rental and have as many guests as possible. Sure, nothing's ever going to go wrong. That would be crazy.
Right. Yeah. Like we have closets in each of our properties that are specific to backups.
Yeah.
And it has shocked our guests. So like they'll say, oh, your coffee maker just broke. Okay, here's the code for this closet. Go in there and get a new coffee maker. Right. And they're just like, what? And you're like, no, seriously, like there's an extra coffee maker in there. And it's those simple things that when you do choose to run it yourself and you don't have a property management company, those are the things that really can help you go the mile. The other thing I would say too is, again, coming back to knowing your market, West Yellowstone is very remote. Very remote. You do not have big box stores. You have like a small little grocery store and like a True Value kind of level hardware store. Everything else is 2 hours away.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so some of it too is that we've also lived and learned that our market is not easy to problem solve if you have things that happen. So like, what are those really common things that we run across?
Yeah.
And like, how can we resolve that? Like, we also have situations like our cleaner couldn't make it one time because the pass closed due to snow and wind and all the things. And so we had a guest show up because our cleaner literally could not get to our cabin on a same day turn.
Yeah.
And they made it there, but we have in that extra closet now, we have all this extra bedding. And they were really good about it. They understood that the situation was very extreme. We had never had it happen before. But again, we understand that we're dealing with a very different type of situation or potential problems because we know our market so well.
And in that case, I'm sure you were ahead of the curve telling them, hey, look, our cleaners can't make it. You're going to arrive to a property that's not it. But here's everything. I'd really appreciate it. Sometimes you offer a discount. My sister and I were managing 20 years ago, and we were just being regular people. When people had a problem, if they were really annoying and you knew they were going to problem, we're like, if you want to leave, we'll just credit your whole stay. We did that a lot. Anyone who was annoying, we would just we would try to get them to leave because, they're leaving you a 2-star review. So let's just call it quits. You guys can go do something else. You're already making a fuss.
Hey, this is Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Julie Thomas as we really go through how anyone can figure out how to do short-term rentals, because that's exactly what her and her husband did. If you're interested in how Julie can help you, go to stredit.com. There's a button right in the middle that says Let's Chat. She's a wealth of information, and you're going to hear more on the second half of this show now.
Also, I think as a short-term rental owner, you have to really be good about taking feedback, because your first bits of feedback are usually really good. But if you think you're the best right away, you're going to miss out. When somebody says, hey, I need, this type of thing. It's very hard with short-term rentals, because you mentioned a blender before. I always make a joke of like a pasta maker, because you definitely don't need a pasta maker, but you're going to have someone who comes in and is like, I can't believe they don't have like a pasta maker. And you're like, are you serious, man? Like, are you kidding? Like, why don't you have a popcorn maker? It's like, you could just make it in a pot.
Yeah.
But there's like, guests have all these things in your head. And honestly, if you're looking at your budget and you're going through the kitchen, like, you need a lot of stuff for the kitchen, and you have to make some decisions on like, how much do I need? How big is it? Like, you have a 5-bed, 4-bath. You need a lot of plates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot.
It makes a difference. I mean, it really does. Because when you sleep 14, you got to have 14 plates plus the overage, for breakage and everything like that.
Exactly. And like, our general rule is to always 2 times everything on that kind of stuff, because then it gets annoying, like they've used every plate on one meal, and then they have to have a washer, and then they have to
they're at breakfast, like, and what's your, like, a lot of people are very like skimpy on like toilet paper, and I'm like, that's crazy. because someone said like,
Yeah.
oh, well, they steal toilet paper. I'm like, if someone has to take the toilet paper, just let them. That's
Yeah.
on them. They have a thing going on. Like, that's crazy. But like, you can't have someone be short on toilet paper. Like
Yeah.
you can't be that cost cutting for the guest. You have to figure out how to do it, right? It's hard. It really is. That's why you really need to know experts, talk to experts. And don't you think the best thing for someone who's getting in a short-term rental, if they just want to do it themselves, you know, they don't want to hire anyone, you have to have friends who do short-term rentals. Get in some Facebook groups, like know somebody who's done it. Like when you had your first one, when you and your husband just did your first one, you would be a great resource for someone who just wanted to start, because you would tell them all the things you're currently messing up as. You know?
Exactly. Right. Like, don't do this. These are like the top
I just did it a week ago and it was a disaster. You know?
Exactly.
I think
exactly.
they investors generally don't know enough investors, because maybe it's uncomfortable. They don't want to go to meetups, but I don't think anything could be more important, especially if you just, you know, like if you don't want to spend to have a coach, knowing someone who's done it and has you can look at their Airbnb and like, oh, they're super hosts. Like, be friends with them.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And it's so easy to do that nowadays. And it was a little bit like before we hopped on the call, we were talking about, you know, the issue is when you assume that you know everything and you're going to get it right? Like, you're going to avoid all these pitfalls that all these other short-term rental hosts avoid. Nobody gets to avoid everything. Like, that is not possible. And so you also just need to tell yourself you always have something to learn. And, you know, being a former teacher, I am a believer in being a lifelong learner. So I get that I'm also on the other end of that spectrum, but like, hop on podcasts, watch YouTube channels, like get into conversations with people, do group chats. Like, you'll have so much that you can learn, and that's only going to benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, it just gives you a wider scope of knowledge to be more responsive. You know, but like you said, your husband was in IT and you were a teacher. You didn't have hospitality experience. It's a hospitality business. We all don't, you know, don't have to have worked for Marriott or something to understand hospitality. I think the best way to do it is exactly what you said in the beginning. We wanted to know, we calculated what we didn't like, and we wanted to produce what we would like. And I think that's a great way to think of it. What have I liked and what have I not liked when I've gone to short-term rentals? Do I like when they have a booklet? You know, do I like a QR code? I personally don't like a QR code. I'd still rather have the old booklets that we used to have 20 years. I like leafing through and looking at the old menus. That's fun to me. You know, but, and again, I think one thing that you said before that's also really important that we've talked about just a little is that knowing your area is so important. It's very, very specific. You have to know what the neighbors want. You have to know what the municipality really wants out of you. You know, you don't want to bother your neighbors and ruin everything right away for your guests. And that can change if you're trying to do short-term rentals in a lot of markets. How many different markets have you had your own in? And how many have you helped? Because I know you're in Minnesota, but you help people all over the country. And that must be interesting to learn, you know, what the differentiators are.
So personally, we have invested in Montana. We have invested in Sedona, Arizona.
Nice.
And we have invested in northern Minnesota. The business partner that I just brought on, who's a good friend who has also been in the short-term rental industry, speaking of connecting yourself with people who are also in the industry, she has invested in western Minnesota, and then she also has properties in Montana. And so those are the different environments that we have invested in. All of them have carried something just a little different. My husband and I are big on not investing in markets that we don't personally really understand. So we have traveled to some of the hot topic markets to see what the buzz is and decide like, oh, should we be going there or should we not? And if we show up like boots on the ground to kind of analyze, do we want to invest somewhere? If we personally cannot understand why people travel to that place, we're not investing there because we won't be able to connect with our guests. We won't really understand how to stage and stock our homes appropriately.
Yeah, you'll present a disconnected STR for sure. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we only invest in locations that we're very, very personally connected to and that we love. And so we scaled up to 6 properties that we owned. Personally, that was like the largest portfolio that we were managing on our own. And then since then, we have been helping people invest in the Minneapolis market. And so right now we are working with a lot of owners who are converting homes into short-term rentals. And we're now a little more on the design side rather than the coaching side. But I've coached people in Ohio and Kentucky and Texas and Florida. I had a client in California. So I've kind of like dipped my toes in a lot of different markets to see where it is that my clients are investing and what's important to them. And for me, I really let them be the guide on like, I know my market, I know why I'm here. And then I'm just helping them really expand on those ideas and just really make sure that they're hitting all of their targets.
Yeah, I lived in Florida for 14 years, and I've had short-term rentals there, and vacation there as a kid. I think Florida is one of the most fun markets just because you can like literally do like the most kitschy stuff ever.
Oh.
Like go like full like bayside, seaside, and it always works. It's just like you can have a little fun with stuff like that. And don't you think, I mean, it's smart, I think, to have a theme because you'll eliminate the people who aren't interested in that and you play right into what people want. I mean, people do go a little bit crazy. But I think if you're in a locale and you play it up, I think that works.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like there's all different scenarios and markets that work for people for different reasons. So like case in point, I worked with this gal who her neighbor's house came up for sale. Everybody thought she was absolutely crazy for turning it into a short-term rental. Like, what? Like, why would this make a good short-term rental? She reached out to me. We started working together and we're talking about it. And she's like, no, like, I really think it's going to do well because we have construction companies that come and are looking for places to stay. We don't have a lot of hotels. So people who have family traveling and they don't have a big enough house to house them can stay there. Sure enough, she gets this thing launched. And she knew her market and she knew exactly the kind of person she was marketing to. She didn't even have to open her calendar on Airbnb. Word got around in the community of what they were doing. And she pretty much had everything booked off like of a platform. So again, case in point, like there is no like right or wrong here. It doesn't have to be $100,000 budget. It could be a $20,000 budget. It could be your neighbor's house for the community. Like, but you have to know. You have to know.
It's a really important point because again, the outward vision on social media and everywhere of short-term rental is kind of like all the pizzazz, but you can have a very regular short-term rental in an area where there's no hotels.
Correct.
Like you said, and could you go midterm rental on that? Yeah, you could, but if you have a short-term rental, maybe someone wants to stay longer, you're going to get a longer stay. I think it works anywhere. I've said continuously, as long as the regulations are fine, I think that you can do really well anywhere in the country doing short-term rentals, as long as you understand your neighbors and you're not going to try to turn it into a party house that I think could just cause more damage to yourself. But yeah, I think that's a great point, because the avatar there is like, hey, it's just contract workers coming in. You don't need to go crazy. They're going to be tired after a hard day's work. You just want it to feel really comfortable, like home. Give them a couple amenities that will work, but you don't have to go crazy.
Right. Exactly. Again, to your point, your avatar really well and you cater to that. And touching too on what you said with the regulations, I think regulations also get a really bad rap, but I would also say they're really important to have. It protects your investment, but it also protects the communities. And I have found that more often than not, communities are not wholly opposed to them, but they want to make sure that they work for everybody. And again, I think it's almost scarier going into places with no regulation than to go into places where it's very clearly defined, like this is what I need to work in.
I much prefer to follow the rules and it's just easier. Again, when they also put a cap on it, that makes it tough because you're on a waiting list. But usually for these areas, there is a lot of NIMBYism against short-term rentals, which like there's not a real reason. They're just like, I don't want it. They're great for somewhere else, but not next door to me. But, I think regulations are just a part of it. And I think you're exactly right. When they're coming in, I think if you're already in there, you're going to get grandfathered in. So get everything up to date. It's tough though. Like this place like the Smoky, someone was telling me like now they have to put in sprinklers. That's like $20,000. So a lot of people are selling. So there are things to consider, but like you can't change it. You can go to the hearings, but if it's coming, the regulations are coming. If you adapt, if you're the first one in the market to adapt, you're going to get all the bookings.
Exactly.
And you'll be good with the municipalities so they're not coming for you, which they do like to do.
Yes, exactly. And it is so important to have good community ties and be working well with local governments because, again, working against them is not going to get you anywhere either, other than needing to sell your house for next to nothing because now you have no ability to have it as an investment property.
Yeah. You don't want to have a star next to your name on the ledger of short-term rentals because you don't listen.
No.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you think people are making getting into short-term rentals right now?
I think the biggest one that I see is just assuming, well, two things. I can go purchase this property and then just list it as is. And then two, I can go purchase this property and it is actually passive income. The number of times that you see people on YouTube channels that say that investing is passive income, there is nothing passive about it. Even if you have a property management company, it's not passive.
No, the person that you bought from was the perfect example of that. If you don't manage the manager, it's just you're going to lose somewhere along the line. And like we were saying, that company was actually doing their job, but it's not, you're not earning the income that you could. And most people now who are getting into it, most of them are looking for really income. Or there's people like me who like personal use, like, let me just get a break-even personal use, which is a great case. Let me get a free vacation home because I just rent it out on other things. But those are great points. I think people have to go in with kind of open eyes, but that means they have to look through the guru part of it, which it's just hard. There's content out there on everything. There's a course on anything. You can think like, hey, I've never done underwater basket weaving. And the next thing you know, Instagram's going to show you like a master course on it. And now all of a sudden you're in a funnel and they want to sell you a program, for 6 months. It's crazy. There's nothing that the internet will not provide for you. But that's why I think our both of our advice that we're saying, just know some people who do it yourself. You're going to do so much better. And then if you really want to scale, I think that's a great time to go to someone. Or if you definitely need help in the design phase, do not try to do it. If you're bad at design, don't try to design it. You're going to do a horrible job and you're just going to take all that stuff out and move in some other stuff.
Yes. Well, because I think too, if you're bad at design, but you also don't understand the other side of it, which is the logistics side, how cleaners interact with your property.
Yeah.
Case in point, we had an owner that went and purchased some various bedding types, but they were going to allow pets. And it was like those microfiber comforter, like duvet covers.
Yeah.
And we were like, that is not going to work with pets. It will be impossible to get the hair off of the duvets, right? Like even if you send them through the wash. So there's things too that I think people like, not just from a design perspective, but from a practicality perspective, talking with other people who have been in the industry or hiring somebody to help you with that, you will then save yourself money rather than spending on the wrong things up front. You'll get better reviews, guests will be happy, and you're spending on the right things.
Yeah. What's your view on pets? And if you do allow pets, what are some things to look out for? Because I go back and forth. For other people, I always say, like, I mean, if everyone wants to travel with their pets, but then, 3 out of 4 dogs are good, but that one that's not, they're like, oh, our dog's fine. And then everything's chewed up and the whole house is ruined. So we know what happens. What's your view on all of it?
Yeah. So it's funny because we don't actually allow pets at any of our properties. We never have. It is also my personal opinion, though, that kids are harder on your properties. And that's me saying that with a 5-year-old. So I understand. Yeah. Like, I do think that kids are actually harder on your properties for the most part compared to pets.
They can also get injured a lot more.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. What I would say is for us, like in Montana, again, coming back to knowing your market, it was an easy decision to not allow pets because we know that our guests are pretty much in the park all day long.
Right.
And
the dog's
animals
just
are not. Yeah, the dog's just going to be in the property. And that's not going to lead to good things. That's going to lead to accidents. That's going to lead to scratch doors. Yeah. Pets can't really go into Yellowstone other than like a handful of places. And so for us, that was like a very easy decision. Some of it too, though, is not up to you as the owner. Like you may have a cleaning company that you really want to work with that says like, I don't I don't clean up after pets. I don't do hair. I don't do whatever. So some
Takes
of it
way
too won't
longer.
even be left up to you. It does.
Yeah.
It takes a lot longer. And I think too, if you're going to allow pets, I think you build that into your rate. I'm not a real believer on like the whole extra fee thing. Like if you're going to
Yeah.
allow
Yeah.
animals, just allow animals, build that into your rate that it's just a little higher if, you're going to allow that. And then keep some money set aside for inevitable damage or that stained carpet or whatever it is that you have to deal with. So I'm not anti-pets. We certainly worked with lots of people who want them in the properties. And we have a dog, but I don't love them in short-term rentals.
I agree. I'm trying to
I don't
think
know.
back in the day if we allowed them or not. I think we did because we just had a huge yard at one of our properties in the Hamptons, and it was like too good of a yard not to allow a pet. And
Yeah.
like the pet it had a doggy door that you could close and open. So it was
Oh,
too, because my sister had lived there before, so it was like it just worked. But
oh,
I could see
yeah.
myself, especially if I had like a real design friendly one, it would be a hardcore no. But again, then I might even like the kind of wellness retreats where I'm not really saying no kids, but I'm thinking no kids, please. You kind of advertise the whole thing as a
Yeah.
couples retreat so you can get away from it, because some properties, they're not good for young kids. They're going to get
Mm-mm.
injured, or it's just not the
Mhm.
vibe.
Right. Right. And yeah, again, the interesting thing too about the safety perspective is yes, that goes both with kids and with pets. Like the other piece of it too in Montana for us is that we're surrounded by wildlife.
Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
bears and moose and fox and wolves and they all roam the neighborhood, and so to have little Fluffy out
Right.
there going
You
to
don't
the
want to just
bathroom at
put
9 o'clock at
appetizers
night.
out in your yard. Yeah, that doesn't make
Yeah, like,
sense.
probably not a good idea. Just like our properties are safe for kids, but we also tell people with young kids, like, you do need to keep an eye on them when they are outside playing, because we've had a female moose and a calf wander through our property before, and they're probably the most aggressive animal out there
Yeah.
if you cross them. And so, yeah, the safety piece is definitely really important, especially if you're going to have access to pools and hot tubs and other things like that. Then there are different levels of safety that you got to start considering.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the short-term rental business?
Ugh. Honestly, I think for me, it's it's getting to experience the different guests that come to our properties because we manage them ourselves. We hear some really cool stories and get to take part in these experiences that families have that, like,
Yeah.
otherwise you'd be completely unaware of what's going on in anybody else's life. And all of a sudden I'm hearing about, so and so's 80th birthday that's being celebrated at our
Yeah, it's
cabin.
cool.
I'm getting, texted pictures of like
Yeah.
their family sitting around the table. And that makes you feel really good. Like there's a lot of pride that comes from that like we helped provide that experience, and like you're part of someone else's family memory that they'll like talk about forever.
Yeah.
I think that has to be my favorite part. And then the second part I would say is the impact that it's had on my family. Like we love to travel, and just the access to the income that's allowed us to travel has just really been a gift that, like, had my husband never just said like, hey, we should jump into this, like, I don't know that we would have ever gotten ourselves there to be able to travel as much as we have. So I would say that's the second part, is like getting all these experiences with my daughter that I don't think we would have had otherwise. And it's a gift.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, those are both great. The first one, I think it's really important for people to hear because sure, you could make money, but as you're saying, for both of those, the money could change the way that you do the rest of your life, change how you vacation, change how you view things, give you an opportunity to go to places that you own, but also other people get to experience. But there's also a visceral benefit of that positive feedback, which of course hurts when it's negative, but you can fix
Yeah.
that. But to have
Yes.
somebody tell you like, oh, we got engaged at your place
I
because it was
know.
so nice, that's something that you're going to remember and they're going to
Yeah.
remember. And I always think of it like the podcast as, and I know you're a podcaster as well. I think of the podcast as like, it's so crazy that we can have this talk, someone's listening and it could change their life. We'll never even know. But like at short-term rental, they're going to tell you,
Mhm.
that it's just amazing. There's
Yeah.
so maybe you make 10,000 less that year, but seven people text you and say it was the best experience of my life. That's worth something. It
Yeah.
really is. It's worth something for like your karmic presence on the earth of why you do a hospitality business.
Yes. Yes. And some of these individuals end up being in our lives for years. Like we've had guests that have stayed with us for like the last 8 years. And now, I don't want to say like you're part of their family, but it's like, oh yeah, hey, like, oh, you're coming back. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's
My
so
sister
cool.
sold one of the short-term rentals to one of the people who kept coming. They come every summer, and then she was like, they were like, hey, can we buy it? And we're like, okay. You like it that much. It's not like that fun to operate. So, I mean, anything can happen there.
Yeah. Truly.
So for somebody who's listening to this right now, they don't have any short-term rentals. They're very interested. They're proactive. They will take advice. Maybe they know a couple people are doing it. What do you think their first step should be in terms of choosing a market? Because you chose markets that made sense for you in the beginning, like where you would want to go. But then where would you give somebody advice? Because I think that's always a hard thing. I always chose places I go. My sister and I always just like, let's just have a free vacation house somewhere, and also we chose near someone that she knew who could manage it for much less. What would you tell somebody?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely would say, I think start first with a list of the places that you love to go and that you understand, or
you'll just be better, right?
That you want to go, that you would love to spend time in. But in order to be able to spend time there, you need to be able to, have a property that you can stay at and all of those types of things that are set up the way that you need to for your family, and manifest that, right? Like put that out there and say like, well, this is a place that I want to start spending more time. So how can I invest there? And I think too, the second part is, where are the needs? So once you make this list of these places that you know and understand, what is the need in these spaces, and how could you serve that need? How could you come up with a solution to the current problem in that situation? Just like the gal that I worked with who thought this can be used by the community, and then that's what she created, and then it happened. And so, there too, I think it's just really knowing what you are in tune with and making that list and starting there, and then just go out to those places, take a look, be in person, see where the gaps are, see what things are selling for, talk with people that are working there locally, and, kind of what's the deal here? What are the needs? What do you see as the gaps in the community? It can be helpful just to have conversations with people in person too, because you never know what kind of information will come across, and you'll say, oh, actually, maybe this is the right time to invest.
Yeah. I mean, just a random local on the street could tell you something that no online article will ever tell you, because it's just very, national based on that. Also, who's your ideal clientele at your companies? Like, who should be reaching out to you and for what?
Yeah, I would say ideal now, we work very closely with people in the Twin Cities, even cabins up north and whatnot. We will work up there as well. But our ideal client is definitely a client who has a property or is purchasing a property that they're turning into a short-term rental, but they are looking at it or listening to this and saying, I have no idea how to stage this. I don't know what kind of furniture I should bring in. I don't even know how to pick a mattress. I don't know if we should have art on this wall. That is our ideal client. If you're asking yourself those questions, we also work pretty closely with property management companies that actually bring us a lot of their clients that need help. We still do coaching, so we'll still do online calls and whatnot with people, but I would say that's definitely our secondary or second tier ideal client, I would say at this point. Our business has shifted a little bit just because the design part's my favorite, like getting in there and like seeing the potential of these houses.
And is the best place, I know you're going to make a brand change soon, but is the best place for people to find you now at stredit.com?
Yes, stredit.com, or emailing me at julie@strvisionary.com. Either one of those is a great place to reach out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much. I'm so glad we connected. I think this was a great episode. And I think the way that you told your story, I think is just so accessible to someone who wants to get started, but has been scared off by all of the kind of crazy, like glitterati around, STR craziness. I think there's a way to just buy a nice, easy property that's not too expensive, not spend a ton on money, and make a very modest income that eventually, as you've said, can change the trajectory of your life by just being smart about it. And I think you showed that. You told the story. It's your story.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. And I would end with saying, even for a seasoned investor, I look at those properties that are kind of the glitz and glamour and the individuals who are making them that way. And even I start to wonder, like, oh, well, what do I have? Or like my property isn't super, and I've been doing this for a long time and like I've been successful at it. So you're not alone in being intimidated by that, but you don't have to be intimidated. And there are a lot of access points in for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for spending the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan. I really appreciate you having me on today.
All right. That was Julie Thomas. She's the founder of STR Edit. You can find her at stredit.com. I'm Jonathan Greene. We'll see you next episode.
Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on the next episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. It's Nico Molino. He's the founder of Live in Luxury. They specialize in short-term and mid-term rental estate investments. They invest, automate, and host Airbnbs and have their own portfolio of STR and MTR rental properties for guests. We're going STR again. It's something that so many people are interested in, and you'll find with this show, as with many others, everybody has their own take. We'll see you next episode with Nico.